time grief we go. Gotta learn to let it go. Once asleep, now awake, feeling every breath you take.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can share how they've decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I am your host, Alix Long, along with my husband and co-host, Dr. David Long. We are so excited to be here today, and happy July. We are in the throes of a new month, and officially Man Month is over. And I have to say how proud and impressed I was with the last podcast. You did amazing.
It was fun.
Yeah, I was so impressed with my team and with Earl and yourself, and just like the leadership in general was phenomenal, and I actually learned a ton.
Did you?
Yeah, I really felt like...
What'd you learn?
Well, I think one of the really cool takeaways was that men themselves have not fully defined masculinity for themselves as the world is evolving, and allowing or asking them to feel more. And then also, I think as we're healing trauma and letting go of systemic boxes that we're placing ourselves in, both men and women might be feeling that we are allowed to be parts and pieces of our femininity and of our masculinity, but that we don't have to be any of those things.
Yeah.
Unless they ring true to us. So it's really cool. I like the idea that we all have the opportunity to not know and evolve.
Yep, I agree.
Well, so today's going to be a shift, right? A little bit of a shift from, we're still, of course, going to be talking about the male perspective from David's chair and the female perspective from mine. And we are coming from a lens, obviously, always of widowdom, which is our expertise. And I am a somatic and mindfulness expert. And David is a healer, a male healer. He would never call himself that, but he is, and he's healing himself. And he is drinking wine today because we've had a long day. So when you podcast from your own home and you own your own company, sometimes there's no rules. You can do whatever you want, David.
Perfect.
Drink whatever you want. So today we're going to talk actually a little bit about something that's come up. I have been thinking a lot about why we're doing what we're doing. We've talked about that every week now. I guess we're redefining it every week. But I'm knee deep in an immersion of our branding and what we're doing and what I'm trying to accomplish. And one of the things that I was thinking was, one of the things that makes our company special is what you talked about with the other men on the podcast is you want to hear from other people, their stories on how they're waking up, how they're evolving, and how they're healing from past trauma, current trauma. And I was thinking about, universally, we're a company that is talking about resiliency post-loss. I like to say post-shatter because I think actually there's no person that will walk through this existence in the human experience and not experience loss. And I'd like to think most of us, unless we're extremely walled up, will experience significant loss at some point in our journey on this planet. And so I wanted to talk about loss and what it means to be resilient from loss, and how do you actually help a person along the way who has experienced a significant loss. We constantly talk about how we've been abandoned by a lot of people that love us and meant well. And I don't think it was intentional, but I think it was people really are at a loss for how to help people who've been through a major loss. Would you agree?
Yeah, generally.
Yeah. And in that, I get a lot of questions from the listeners and just from friends and people who are experiencing loss or have a friend who's in deep loss. What can they do to be there for someone? And so it got me thinking on a lot of different levels of loss. So after the shatter, right? After the dust settles, if you're experiencing death and that is the loss you have, or a death of a life, there's a refractory period once like the trauma dust has settled and subsided, where people around you go back to their life, right?
Sure.
The calls and the frequency of people swooping in to help, which that love bolsters you for quite some time. It's actually really super helpful. You think maybe it'll be there forever.
Yeah.
And then it just starts to slowly diminish. And the loneliness really sets in, which already you feel a deep amount of loneliness. And so then there's secondary losses. So you lose traditions that you once had. You lose the identity that you had been carrying of the existence of who you've been up into the loss. Traditions might change. Jobs might change. Everything might change. Your house won't feel the same. Your life won't feel the same. Every routine you've ever had goes away.
Yeah, I mean...
These are secondary losses.
I was just thinking that maybe you go through a large part of, at least I did, where I thought that I was never going to be alone no matter what.
In your life? Prior to the loss?
Like your journey is with your family of origin, and then with your siblings, and then with your wife, and then your kids, and then you're never really feel like or maybe it's just an inner desire to not be alone, right? You don't want to do this alone.
Yeah, I think that.
And I think the loss really, because all that stuff does fade, because they have to go on with their lives, right? And then you are left in the really stark realization that, you're in this alone, and that the only way you're going to survive is something you do, right? There's nothing, all the meals, which are wonderful, are not going to sustain you for the rest of your life.
Well, and actually there's a constant stream of people checking on you. Your cell phone
it does really prop you up.
It does, and it also distracts you from being alone.
Right.
So you have a lot of things to do post shatter. So you have a lot of people to answer to, and if it's a death that is the shattering loss, you have a funeral to plan. You have constant stream of people in and out. You have a lot of closing of chapters and finishing of business to attend to, and so that keeps you so busy that you have these moments of like the end of the night when everyone goes to bed, where you cry in the shower.
Profound loneliness, really.
Right. You reach across to the bed if it's your spouse, of the person that was once there, and there's no more foot, or there's no more patterning of what you've done every night for X amount of years. And so those moments are extreme.
Yeah, I think it was one of the first times in my life that I thought I was alone.
Yeah.
That I was really in this journey alone. Because even when you're not alone, you're a watcher. Like, that was the first time in my life I was really watching. I was able to observe what was going on around me without being
Me too.
In it. And so that in and of itself makes you feel kind of alone.
Yeah.
Even if the conversation's not idle, because it wasn't always idle, but it was a lot of idle conversation, you really feel separate and alone. And that's okay, because the truth is, what I've learned in the last 4 years is, and we talked about this before, is the truth is our life journey is a individual journey.
It is.
Right? You can do it with somebody else, but at the end of the day, your experiences and your personal growth and development and your choices are your own.
Yeah.
And you can avoid that like I did for a long time, and the truth is it's unavoidable forever. Eventually you have to realize that you are in fact alone, in a lot of ways. And I was alone before, but I surrounded myself in such a way that I didn't seem or feel alone,
And it's indicative of the person that's experiencing the loneliness and the type of loneliness that you feel. So David is habitually, since I'm his wife, I can tell you, he's a busier, and so he would busy himself to the point of never knowing he's alone.
Yeah.
Except for the moments, which inevitably we all have them, even if you are alone and you're very busy and full of people life, you will have moments where you feel alone when you are alone. So the truth of who you are. At this company, I like to call that your essential self, the you that was there well before the world told you who you were supposed to be in order to be loved.
Yeah.
And it's important that we tap into that. That was the other thing in the male talk last week of the man's roundtable was, I love this mirroring work that you're talking about and doing. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, that it is mirroring work or mirror work, and it's looking at yourself in the mirror and figuring out like, who's this person in front of me, and it's asking internal questions of like, who am I and what do I need to be happy? What do I want in this world? What do I need in order to feel connected, safe, and loved? And those questions can be something you don't ask ever. Mm-hmm. I ended up today creatively writing a blog. We have been going through a ton in our home. My team is stepping up a lot, so you might see them a little bit more in the podcast than general. But we were diagnosed with vasoprevia. We have this like looming hospital stay coming, and it has put some deep pressure on us. It's gotten me to think about secondary losses. So secondary losses are, as we talked about, all the losses that happen around your life after the major loss. So because this one loss happened, there's thousands and thousands of other small, maybe not observable by other people, losses that you're experiencing internally all the time. You and the primary people who are exposed to the loss.
Yeah.
And so each individual person, if you're going to look at it from like our perspective, where it's a spousal death with children, we experience all these secondary losses. Our children have their own secondary losses that are very different from our experience. So each person that's going through the grief cycle or the loss in one person's death, there might be hundreds of people experiencing different kinds of secondary losses to this death. Divorce is really similar, right? Like divorced people can always say this, or job loss is very similar. Like everything changes because this one, I'm going to call it death or loss, happened, so that the whole world existence is not the same. So I've been thinking about this a lot in this scare with the baby, and the baby is fine, but like the potential delivery is where the problem is lying. And so like a natural progression, you can see I'm getting obviously more rotund here, and the further closer to delivery we get, the scarier it's getting, where natural things like Braxton Hicks and contractions, which you would normally be super excited about and not think a thing of it and be like, yes, we're ready for the baby, is putting us in panic because it puts the baby at risk in this scenario. So I was thinking about like how hard we've had to work to claim our worthiness of being in this marriage, to be in love again, to stand on whatever platform we're standing on and tell people in the world that despite your discomfort with our deep, impassioned love, it does not take away the love that we had for our first spouses. They can all sit together in our heart. And even if we say things that might be difficult for those who loved our loved ones, as did we, to hear, it does not take away our love for our first marriages and our anything from our past, right? So if you are a widow or a person who got divorced and gets in another relationship, or someone who's in a loss and makes a right turn to something towards safety, love, and connection, we are advocating for you to live your one life and be awake and know what's good for you on the inside, and to silence the noise of the external influence and opinion. Despite all respect you may have for those who are telling you what to do, you only get one life. And what we're saying is, as David said, it's an individual journey. And you can be in, cohesion or cohabitation or co-regulation as we are. You can be deeply in love. You can be highly connected. I still have to live for me and know what's inside of me and love myself, and David has to do the same. So when I wrote this blog, I was thinking about how unfair it's been that we've had this bump in the road. I was thinking how unfair it is. Like, we've worked so hard. We've been through so much. Why are we having this one thing that I've wanted for so long, and that we've worked really hard to get to this place to be safe enough to make this choice that was just for us. And it was really like against a lot of people's opinions. We did this thing, and it was kind of dangerous, right? Because it could put us at risk again of loss. And, you know, you can't be pregnant without some risk. There's lots of risks, and it changes our family, and it changes the dynamics of the kids that have gotten stable, and it has a whole host of worries that come along with that, of course. But as I said in the last podcast, which was like 2 ago when I was on, we are not immune to loss, even though we've had loss. And so I've been trying to figure out a way to stay super centered in this chaos that is around us. And it's reminiscent for me of being back in the cancer journey in a way, because it's a medical-driven lack of control. Things are happening inside of me, to me, and I have no control over them. It feels very similar to how Carl's diagnosis went down, and like I'm trying to do similarly things that I knew were successful in the past, which was research to the nth degree to prepare myself educationally, but not do the same things I did in the past, which was anxiety up so hard that I lived disconnected from those I loved and missed moments, even though I was trying really hard to be present. It's not possible when you're not safe. So, and here we're sitting today, I was thinking about secondary losses, and we're kind of in the midst of like something that's not going the way we would have hoped. Something that's been difficult. And there's some loss and grief around that, for me at least. I don't know if there's for you. Yeah.
I was just thinking that...
You're getting a little choked up?
First of all, I've never thought about secondary loss before.
Yeah, it's not a talked about thing.
It's something that happens.
As much.
It's something that happens for sure. I mean, it's unavoidable, I think. And it's definitely one of those things that probably most people have that experience.
Yeah.
It's probably universal. But I have never even considered it before, which I think most people probably don't or won't.
They just blanket it under the term grief.
No. Well, I was thinking, I mean, there's all kinds of little secondary losses, right? I mean, there's all kinds of every decision you make, if you make it authentically, has the potential to have loss consequences.
Yeah, true.
I mean, when I think about the friends, I hesitate to say that I've lost my friends because, I mean, I still consider them my friends. And I know most of them would drop whatever they're doing, as would I for them, even though we don't talk as much and we don't eat dinner, we don't live in the same.
Your primary circles have changed. That's like another version of that.
And I have real ambiguous feelings about that because it's no fault of their own, really. And I don't know because I've never talked about it with them, which is a mistake. I don't know if they blame me or not. I think most of them would forgive me or allow me, this change and this distance and this life that I lead. And I think some of them might even be pleased to have ever been close, that was okay. A couple people spring to mind that I know they don't need or want anything from me. They're just pleased that we were ever friends, Mm-hmm. But it is true that there's a little bit of a loss because we were closer, so I've lost that closeness with some of them. And I haven't really made really close new friends.
Yeah, it's hard.
And I think actually that those two things are kind of related, that unfortunately new people that I meet are similar to old people that I knew in that they can't understand. And that's okay. I mean, I think actually in my years past that probably would have locked me up. In fact, it probably would have dictated my life path somewhat to please my acquaintances and to be something that I thought was acceptable to them and to make decisions that were acceptable to them. Those days are way over.
Yeah, there's not a lot of time for that.
And now, in fact, whenever I sense that, it triggers a kind of anti-movement in me of, no, wait, you're people pleasing again. Do you really want to do this? Does this really make you happy?
Right.
And when you start asking those questions, most people don't ask that question. And when you're the only one in the room really asking the question of, do you want to be there or do you want to do this? It sets you aside immediately. Saying that, there are some things that I used to do that I still enjoy and want to do. I was thinking about the Coastal Club. I really enjoy the Coastal Club, and that is with my older friends that I was very close with.
Sure.
I really enjoy being there. I love being out of doors, and I love communing with them for that weekend or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's not like a cold turkey all or nothing. I think that's really where it comes down. Like I'm choosing that. I want to do that. You know,
right?
I'm not choosing to do travel soccer, or other things that I felt like I had to do back then. I could name a million things. So I don't know. Yeah, secondary loss. It's very complicated. It's sad. It's kind of sad.
Well, it can go on forever. So I was trying to think about the ways that we could be helpful to listeners out there who might want to be supportive to someone who's in loss, or those who are in loss who might want some help on how to, like maybe you're in the deep abyss and the dust just settled from the event that created the loss in your life, and maybe you're not sure what is next when the quieting of the noise is happening, where you're starting to feel the loneliness set in.
Yeah.
I wrote this blog today and I was thinking about it like from the reality, and it's actually cool to be this far out and look back. I had my friend who lost her husband. We're technically supposed to be on bed rest, so I didn't go to the funeral, and I felt disconnected in that way. Like, nonetheless, it was like thousands and thousands of people looked amazing. Like, I mean, people from all over the world. It looked very epic. He was a very epic person. Anyway, but I was thinking about the more big the life and personality is, I think the more lonely you might feel when that noise goes away, because that much bolstering is so powerful. But in the blog today, I was talking about what is it that makes it so painful in loss? Like, what exactly is the pain? I think we can all identify that the pain is you've lost a person that you're deeply connected to, and they're no longer there to talk with. The life you had with them is gone. They're gone. Their presence, their smells, their existence, and everything that involves is gone. Therefore, if it's a partner of yours or a spouse, there's no more us. There's no more family in the same way. So those are the secondary losses, right? You lose your family dynamics. You lose your traditions. Christmas will never be the same. They don't cook the same meal. They don't drink their coffee in the morning with you. Even the way you sleep, you eat, everything changes. And I think those who haven't been through a loss, they know that you're suffering and you're lonely and you're in pain, but they don't understand that the secondary losses are just hitting you and hitting you and hitting you and hitting you. And the pain is the constant reminder that you've been abandoned, and everything you've known and loved and secured into or attached to has left you, is gone. I'm going to call it abandonment. So it's abandonment everywhere. And there's no reprieve. You cannot get it away from it. Widows and people in significant loss will describe the feeling, and you hear this frequently. This is a frequent feeling, that the world is racing and spinning around like nothing. Everyone around you is moving like nothing has happened, and you are literally watching. You become what Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, great book, calls the watcher of the self. And the grief forces you to slow down. And I'm not sure if it's, you know, the sympathetic nervous system takes you way down into dorsal vagal, and like your brain is so overloaded with sensory input of trauma that you can't take in a lot of information at one time. It's almost like, you know what I mean? Like your brain doesn't process. So you're like very slow. And in some ways you're very anxious and you have anxiety propelling you. But there's a loneliness in that too. You recognize you're different. You're in a different energy field than everyone around you.
I think everybody recognizes that.
They recognize it too.
Right.
But the recognition in them is in a sadness, a supportive sadness, a loving sadness in the beginning. But there is a deep, subtle anxiety within that they recognize they don't want that to happen to them. The piece that they're missing, which is the enlightenment piece, that maybe we don't even recognize consciously as the griever, is the regret that you sit with, the guilt and the regret. And so the guilt and the regret is, I wasted all this time and energy creating check boxes or ladder steps, climbing in this beautiful life that I had. I was achieving and climbing towards things that in this moment I realize have no significance in the losses that I've had. And not that you shouldn't have, like, you know, worked in your career and you know, you're not going to like be able to rectify and go back, but you recognize the energy you outputted towards certain parts and energetic pieces of your life, large parts, by the way, you can never get back. And then there's an internal regret and loneliness in that there's no opportunity to repair or go backwards and smell your partner. Grieving people will say this, especially spouses, maybe children. I haven't lost a parent yet, so parental loss I've only read about and talked with other people about. There's ribbons of similarity, but it must be different. Obviously, my children have lost a parent, so I'm sitting right next to it a lot, but it's a little harder as a mother who watches their children. My need to want to make it better, it might overpower my ability to just be present with their grief. But it's interesting. So that loneliness is something that I don't think I've ever put to words, and I'm not sure if you resonate with that. But it's a deep regret of, why did I spend all this time not living in the present? An immediate blow of every part of external shattering takes you into the innermost essential self without your asking for it, really. It's required. And there you sit in almost a heavenly, godly way, which you're atheist, so you're not going to agree with me in this. But it's godly in the sense that, like, you are down to nothing. And the nothingness is all that's outside of you that you're reaching for to feel better or loved about yourself. And you're in an inner space so deep that you know you can only pull yourself out of this space. And there's such a deep, powerful loneliness in that you then feel the separateness of yourself and others, and they feel it too. Because they recognize, they don't understand that enlightened piece. They don't understand the fragility piece. They're still going on their sleepwalking ways, climbing the ladder, because that is what they believe. And to be fair, like, it's okay to believe that is keeping them safe and keeping their family safe and loved. And that's what, like, everyone thinks is what we're supposed to do to be loved and connected. On the other side of loss, you recognize all that shit doesn't matter. Your cars, your house. I mean, you're thankful to be secure and have your things, but nothing you've accomplished will keep you away from that loneliness and that regret. And that is the pain. You've realized that you abandon your true self in what was a deep connection, or potential for deep connection if you didn't get there all the way. And you realize that your life is now gone, so there's an abandonment of everything you know. And then eventually, like, you can't live from anywhere but the truth of who you actually are, because you have no energy to fake it anymore. And everybody already knows. It's like a veil is lifted, and they see you as this weak, sad, semi-needing help, broken person. So the facade is not even, you walk in a room and you know that energetically people are already aware that you're in a down. And so you don't even try to fake it. And then there's that. And then that separateness, I think, weeds away or hacks away at all of the surfaceness in your life. So that might be way too deep for like how to fix, but I wanted to say, like, for those of you who are out there, watching your person, a friend, a sibling, whatever, someone close to you, a coworker who's been through a massive loss. If you want to help, you best do some inner work to recognize that they will never be the same again. The person that you were best friends with, coworkers with, whatever, they're never going to be the same again. And we say that all the time. But they're not. They can't. They cannot survive like that anymore because the fragility of life has been open. And we might, if we work really hard, and I guarantee if you find someone who's working hard enough to numb this out, they are taking drugs, they are drinking themselves into like numbness, or they're overworking over something to numb out. It's the only way to ignore it. And there's moments where that doesn't even work, right?
Yeah.
I see this is impacting you.
Yeah, it just takes me to that moment, that 6 months to a year where you really can feel that change happening, and it's super scary. Mm-hmm. And one of the, I actually remember when we first started talking, I had a really tremendous feeling of relief that I wasn't alone.
But you were alone.
Yeah, but I wasn't, the thoughts that I was having and the feelings that I was having were not
alone.
Crazy and alone.
Yeah, abnormal.
Yeah, you're talking about it. It's taking me back to that spot, and it was, and I did briefly try to distract myself, with the kid duties and all that kind of stuff with what I thought I was obligated to do. Yeah, there's lots of secondary loss, and then there's also, there's the rebuild too, which is really can be amazing, which I think we witness to all the time.
Well, so I wanted to talk about why it was so painful. I think that's semi-universal, but it might be my experience. And
the pain?
The why we're in pain. The loss, the out and the in loss. It's like the loneliness both ways. And I think that when the gift in it, that my new grievers out there, if you're listening, and you're looking for hope, for resiliency, for how to get back up, the deep loneliness that you feel, I want you to breathe into that. Okay, so allow it to be, because you are actually alone. But if we're honest, you can hold the loss of that beautiful person that's no longer there, and you can also understand that you've always been alone. And had we found power in that versus fear, as we're talking about, the fear actually comes from the childhood wound of places and spaces as we were evolving as humans and little humans growing to big humans, that loneliness was bad, we weren't lovable, and then we couple and we find community and connection with others to heal these empty parts of ourselves. And I think often we fill gaps of unhealed places with other people's needs, affection.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
In our partnerships. And this can create codependency when it's off balance, which I'm very, very guilty of, right? Like my need to be needed. One of the things that I've had to unpeel as we're on bed rest and rest of all natures I don't even want to talk about, is that I cannot be valuable in the ways that I was because I have to slow down. And I really struggle with that. I still find a lot of, I'm only valuable when I'm doing something. Not I'm just valuable with my lonely self by myself. I think a lot of us can relate to this, right? So that loneliness that you're feeling out there, settle into the idea that it's okay to be sad and grieve hard about it. But that truly you've always been alone. And that this is forcing you to attend to the self. And we call this self-love in the world, but I believe, and actually my griever clients and my clients that I'm working with, is one of the things I said today and with a person I was talking to who's in kind of working the grief cycle, we have to learn to trust that ability to be with the self first, just like you're building a relationship with another person. Like, you can't fall in love with someone until you feel you can trust them and you're safe enough to open and be vulnerable, right? You can be in lust, you can be in like, but deep committed love requires trust and vulnerability. When we flip that internal mirror inside of ourselves and we're deeply alone, we don't even know how to be there, and we really don't know how to trust that we have all the tools inside of us. This is a very yogic philosophy, and the yogis have been saying this forever. We have everything we need inside of us to take care of ourselves, to love ourselves, to be okay. And that we should be able to coexist and correlate and, co-regulate with someone that we love and be deeply in connection. But you cannot be in any of those partnerships until you absolutely trust that alone, I will survive this. I will find myself. I will take care of myself. I will climb back out of this hole of grief and deep loneliness and loss of, like, the fact that I can't go back and change all of the patterns and the asleepness that I did and all the loss that I brought upon myself by not being connected to that person I loved and I can no longer fix. Energetically, you can, if you believe it, like I do, and energies are still around us at all times. I don't think that energy is not destroyed. So I believe the energy of Betsy and Carl are still in the world. And I'm coming in right now actually super fucking pissed at Carl. And I'll say that very honestly. I had a financial situation that popped up from a past partnership. And that's all I'm going to say. But it's made me very angry with him. But nonetheless, I'm still angry with him. That's still an emotional connection to a person who's been gone for quite some time. And you will never lose that, right? You can continue, if you continue to emote for a person that's not in this space that you're in, are they really totally gone? Yes, they're not present here to talk to. And they're not going to come and fix the problem. And they're not going to reach their leg across the bed and snuggle you at night. And you're not going to hear them breathing. And they're not going to be cooking in your kitchen. Right? And they're not going to be fixing your skin. And they're not going to be making beautiful homes and beautiful artwork and making everything pretty. But energetically, you're still emoting with them for the remainder of the partnership that you have created with them. And we have children, so it will be forever. And that will happen with your parents, too. You will still mourn the loss of them after they're gone. And friendships. There will still be those moments where you're going through the motions of something you would have done together, and you'll feel energetically some kind of thing. And in that, it's interesting, like, that is not an easy swallow when you're deep in grief in the beginning. That's not good enough, is what we'd want to say if someone tells you that. So my big advice is, don't give people things and statements that say, at least, if there's any phrase you're about to hand to someone who just lost someone, don't say an at least you, and fill in the blank. At least you had 2 children together. I got that a lot. At least you guys built your dreams together. At least you had X, Y, and Z. That doesn't make anyone feel better because the gap of loneliness is already there. And we already feel enough guilt about how we didn't capture everything we could have. And we now, all of a sudden, in a moment's time, understand that the fragility of life is so, so precious and that we did not take advantage of the time that we had. We took everything for granted, as almost everyone in this world does, until you don't have the luxury to do that anymore, which is loss. So don't say at least. And your secondary way to support someone is you love them and recognize you are not going to be loving the same person anymore. And if you want to be a deep friend with them forever, you're going to better sit tight and allow all sorts of crazy changes to happen. And if you're a real friend, you might truly eventually evolve with them and recognize that the person you're going to see on the other side of this loss will have glimmers of the old person that they were, but is the real them, the them that they could never show the world before because they were way too scared. And now that the worst thing in the world has happened, they're already so alone. There's no fixing that. They're so separate from the rest of the world. There's nothing to choose except for themselves and to stay separate. Therefore, the only person that's going to get them out of the separateness, well, they're never going to get out of the separateness necessarily. They will always hold that stigma. But it's only going to be you. It's only going to be them. And all you can do is sit by, buckle your seatbelt, hold their hand. Don't say too much of, you should do this. Don't do that. It's best if you don't sell your house. It's best if you don't go on a date. It's best if you don't do this. The judgments are only going to provide more separation. Right?
Yeah,
Are you okay?
Yeah, I don't know. Just a lot to think about. I think probably the best advice I can give is you've got to be prepared to let them go and lose them.
You've already lost them.
Right.
You've already lost them. They're gone. They died when the person died.
The chances of them staying in the same, even if they stay in the same place.
Divorced people too.
Right, they're not going to be the same person.
They can't be.
Yeah,
because of the secondary losses, which no one wants to consider. They've lost everything. It's not just a human they've lost. They've lost the life attached to the human. Divorce is the same. Everything goes away. All the traditions, all the things, all the habits, all the everything. And they can't be the same person because clearly that's not going to work for them because the other person's gone. And without the other person cohabitating, co-regulating, co-communing, making love with them or being in love with them, they don't know who they are. Because a lot of how they showed up in the world was to be what that person needed them to be. That's how most of us live our life until we're awake. And then when we're awake, we recognize, wait a minute, not all of that was bad, right? That's okay to love someone and want to be the best thing and be what they need you to be. But it may not be totally authentic. Even if it's done in love and in good energy towards this beautiful connection and life you've built. It's why we feel alone in our partnerships, in our relationships, when they're really like on the surface looking amazing, but you've got this great house and people will shame you like, look how lucky you are. Everything looks amazing from where I'm sitting. Well, I feel a deep loneliness. And my Christmas card is perfect. My home is perfect. I have enough. I have more than abundance in all the areas of my life. Why do I feel so alone? Well, do you know yourself? It's an ever-evolving thing, as Earl said on the last podcast, right? Like, he's ever-evolving and figuring out what does it mean to be a man for him. Well, that's a humanistic statement. We're ever-evolving and figuring out who we are. But if we don't ask the question, and if we live our identity through someone else, far more than through our own internal self.
I actually think most people are not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we've surrounded ourselves.
I don't know if it's 51%, but I think it's a majority of people that are not doing that. And I think people that are not are always going to have difficulty relating to people that are. Well, it's threatening, and it's. I mean, I know I've had conversations with long-term acquaintances, and then as soon as you tell them how you feel, I mean, they just turn and go. They can't.
Well, to like our grievers, right? That's when you axe out, when people start to fall off in grief because you're emoting, because you're sad, because you can't fake it, because you can't hide anymore. You don't have the energy, and you now recognize that life is so precious that hiding is how you got into the pain in the first place. Like missing the moments that are happening in the now and being present to what is real is how you have all this regret with a person who you can't fix it with. So you sure as hell don't want to do it moving forward with those you love and care about. And then you have a secondary loss when you're like, wait a minute, do they not really love this part of me? Well, in their defense, did you ever show this side of it? Probably not, right? Like, it's going to take some more grieving for you to recognize, like, it's okay. These people need to go because they can't jump on board. They have to stay in the sleepwalking because they're way too afraid. And at that moment, they don't have the emotional capacity to get out of those coping patterns. They don't have the safety. Maybe they don't have the connection. It's not their fault per se. It is their fault, but it's not. They're doing it to keep themselves safe. And it's not a reflection of your worthiness. To me, in the beginning, it felt like, holy shit, my husband died. And then I lost like all of these friendships that I thought were so deep and meaningful. And they were in the time that they were.
Yeah, that's probably the right phrasing.
They were best friends with the person I was prior to the loss.
That's right.
They were not best friends with the real me, and the real problem is that was me. I have the problem.
Right.
I was the one showing up in a way that wasn't authentic, and that's okay too.
For me, that's the palatable way to kind of think about it. Is that
it's hard to digest the other way.
Yeah, because I really am a different person. I see the world differently. I feel differently on a ever daily basis, and it's. I mean, in a lot of areas, for example, like emotionality, it's a 180-degree turn. You know, it changed everything, but some things it changed 180 degrees.
Why do you think you changed 180 degrees after death, after loss?
To survive, I think.
Right. Okay, so that I wrote in the blog too. If you don't take care of yourself and love yourself enough to take care of yourself to get out of the dark hole, you will kill yourself or die. Right. I don't know if this is the right word, like an existential death or whatever, like existential death, like where you're like, you're dead, but you're walking around, like, because you can't. There's no other way to build resiliency and return to any form of living.
Yeah, and that was
with the knowledge.
That was a very conscious choice. I did consider it.
Dying.
Or just staying awake dead, live dead. Mm-hmm. But I decided that I didn't want to live that way. I couldn't.
And you decided you didn't want to live that way. Why? Because of all the regrets of that way in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the universal truth, right? And I wasn't saying this thinking about you. I was actually thinking about my own experience.
Of course.
And I was thinking about, like, my friend who's just essentially had the funeral for her husband. And I was thinking this, like, beautiful, powerful, like, show up of all these thousands of people. And how would it be for her when she had to get really quiet?
Right.
And how was it for me when that happened? Carl we had thousands of people at his funeral.
Right.
It's really hard.
Actually, you know, we're not the only people that wear this.
I know. Well, of course,
I don't.
Buddhist.
Yeah, I don't want to.
The East knows everything, right?
Well, no, I mean, there are people that take advantage of it as well.
What do you mean?
I'm sure this will offend somebody, but it's fine. If it's overly offensive, you can edit it out. After Betsy died,
offensive things out.
And they waited an appropriate amount of time, too. It wasn't immediate. It was like the 3-month period, like 3 to 6 months. Uh-huh. I had a lot of strangers come to the door and try to introduce me to Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. I probably had 6 different people come.
Well, I think people think that is a way for you to help you find healing. But again, religion, for those of you who are...
That's not the way I took it at all.
Well, right. For those of you that are deeply religious, and those of you who are deeply emphatic about a way someone is supposed to live their life.
Right.
If you're evangelical about your faith because it's gotten you through something, right, there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you go inside of yourself and in your loneliness and in your self-healing journey and your resiliency, that your connection with the higher power is what pulls you out of the dark, I could see why you would want to be evangelical about that for someone else.
Yeah, for me, it felt manipulative and very exact opposite what I was feeling inside. because it was an external fix. It was, this is what you have to do, and here's the prescription, and you'll see this is going to get you through. And I was starting to have the feeling at that time, that 3 to 6 month period, where I was starting to dawn on me that if I was going to live, I was going to have to do it myself. Like I was going to have to turn internally and really figure out who I am and what I want. And that is not what they were selling. They were selling a solution, a pre-made solution, so that I wouldn't have to.
Religion can be extremely tricky. Now, I am a person of deep faith in a higher power and in the divinity. I never want to put. I realize after having to pull out of a religious unhealthiness, like a script given to me that was given to me as a young child, and that I followed and carried, and really truly like naively believed that the higher power that I believed in was going to come down and give my husband the miracle that would save his life. I mean, we would go to healing masses, and I carried relics in my wallet, and I was extremely let down when that didn't happen, thinking like, he really was a great person and did everything right. And if someone deserved to have a healing, it would have been him. The way that he impacted other people's lives was like a ripple effect. I mean, he had trouble like being present in himself, and sometimes in the closest relationships, I think. But when it went to his work, he was he changed lives every single day. It was really powerful. So why wouldn't he have gotten this miracle? What I recognize, people will often say to you in grief, God will provide, God will provide, God will provide. Well, I believe that to be true. Whatever your God is, whatever that higher power belief is for you, and David and I are very different in this belief system, but it's okay. I respect his beliefs deeply, because what he, in my opinion, if you're out there judging him for being atheist, if there is a higher power and there is an afterlife, he is the most beautiful person I've ever met in my life, who does nothing but love and show up and give his heart every day. And no higher power that I can take part in would not have him a part of whatever universe is beyond this universe. And if you can't see the world like that, and you're so rigid in your definition of absolutism, when you definitely know that you don't know, you might want to reconsider how you approach helping someone in grief. Because you're most likely, if you're trying to help a griever, they're going to be questioning their relationship with the higher power if they had one. And even if they didn't have one, they're going to be questioning their relationship with the afterlife.
So that was kind of deep. Secondary loss, I don't think we were going to get out of that conversation without being pretty deep.
Yeah, secondary loss is extremely deep. And I wanted to highlight...
Which, I mean, I've never been on the other side of it, but I'm sure it sucks for them too, right?
When your friend goes through loss?
Yeah, because, I mean, you're probably going to lose that friend too. If you were friends with the spouse.
Well, that's a tertiary loss too. Like, if not a secondary loss for them. Again, I was saying, like, think about the ripple effect of loss in general.
It really is kind of fucked up, and I'm racking my brain while you're talking to think, how could that be avoided? And I don't know, other than maybe if you really are your authentic self to start with, and you have a secure attachment style and all the stuff that we all dream about having that none of us have.
Oh my gosh. I think about...
Maybe then, but...
Well, I would love to bring him on here. Icy Rappaport, Chuck Rappaport, he's a world-famous photographer who lost his wife.
Yeah.
And I follow him actually because... for those of you who don't know, my origin in mindfulness is in Pilates, classical Pilates. I am a classical Pilates teacher, and it is my primary love and the first thing that drew me into mindfulness. And he is the OG photographer for like a ton of things, like JFK's assassination. Like, you can follow his work. He's literally like been on the forefront of news photography for like forever. Major world events. But he also had a friendship with Joe Pilates, And he is responsible for a lot of the beautiful photos you see of Joe Pilates in his studio. And anyway, so as a Pilates nerd, I follow him. And
that's the understatement of this century.
Okay, well, we haven't tried classical Pilates. Let me be clear. There's different versions. Classical Pilates, all Pilates is amazing. Not hating on any style. All good for the body. But if you want true transformation and you want true mindfulness, classical Pilates. And in fact, hit up a real Pilates studio. You can go way back and look at Alicia Ungaro's video. She is the queen and the person to learn from. Anywho, there's real Pilates studios all over the country, all over the world, actually. And I'm
Speaking of secondary loss.
Secondary loss for what? That I'm not teaching as much?
Yeah, your Pilates is kind of emotionally.
Definitely. I have not been able to do Pilates. It's a huge loss to me. I have not been able to teach Pilates because of all the things that are happening right now. I'm definitely feeling a loss of identity.
I would say pretty much ever since we met, you've been in transition in your relationship with Pilates.
I'm trying to find a balance in...
in fact, I would actually argue now, retrospectively, you have been slowly shedding it since Carl died.
I have not been shedding Pilates. I have been shedding my overworking and attachment to the business, which was Pilates, because I owned a Pilates studio.
Yeah, no, I don't mean your personal practice. I mean
No.
I mean
and not my love for it. My love for it is true.
I mean your business relationship.
Well, that's another loss, right? So like after he died, and I started to pay attention to my authentic self, we're finalizing our talk on secondary losses, and I've had a lot of them, a lot of my career choices, a lot of everything. I had to peel away what parts and pieces are true to the self. And I would say that, as I already discussed, busying myself, doing for others, keeping myself in a constant state of motion has been a protective measure of mine. And there was no way to untangle that without untangling it. And untangling it means I made choices for us, and I've stepped away from studio ownership to the capacity that I was prior to, and like high level teaching to the level I was. And I'm trying to be okay with the me that isn't getting validation from external.
Mm-hmm. Me too. That's really hard.
It's really hard.
Really hard.
So, especially in my career, I was at the crux of potentially partially becoming a teacher trainer for Alicia Ungaro, the world's best teacher. That's still an option, but I got pregnant and needed to make some choices for our family and for myself, and authentically was not going to be able to complete what I needed to complete, and could have pushed really hard to get it done. But I was like, I don't want to overwork and get back to practices of disconnecting.
Well, that's actually part of the awakening or whatever, or the secondary loss thing is it's hard to fake.
Well, and you can't do it all when you've had this much grief.
Right, and it's hard to do things that you want to do them, but you kind of want to do something else or want to do...
Well, because like we talked about, the fragility of life. At the end of your life, you get one that you know of, that someone will write a speech about you, a eulogy about you. I think about it a lot. A eulogy project, I do it a lot in my retreats. I haven't done it in a while, but what do you want people to say about you? Well, I know that I want my family to feel so loved by me. There's no question that I gave them every ounce of energy I had. The rest of it, I have passions. I have a lot of things I'm connected to. I love my job. I love Pilates. I love this job. But when it comes to compromising my family, I will never do that again. Never. Never. And I was talking about Chuck Rappaport because I do actually think he was totally awake with his wife and loved the shit out of her. I mean, anyone who's not following this guy, you should follow him. He's amazing. I see Rappaport. Look him up. He is still posting by maybe 3-4 times a week photos of his wife, memories from when he loved her, from the start of their relationship. They had children, they traveled, she's Mary was vivacious. I feel like I'm watching an old movie and this deep love story. And I was thinking he has all these, he's captured her over and over again, and the way he's storytelling through these old photos that he took of her, of the memories they shared together, it is so clear that maybe just as a photographer, that's how you see the world. I'm not sure, but like he saw her. He was present to details in every capture he had, down to the way that other people felt about her in the room. Like he was present.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And his loss is so palpable. But it's as though he has no regrets. It's just the retelling of this deep love story, and he's feeling her absence, but not his regrets. I mean, I'm sure if I got him on here, he might have some regrets, I'm sure. Like,
I would be curious to what he thinks, what he says.
Well, Chuck, if you're out there listening, you know I'm a little bit of a stalker of you. I love you. I think you're fantastic, and he's like the widower of all widows. It's amazing. I would love for someone to love me that much.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a lifetime commitment to authenticity that I just didn't have.
Yeah. Well, it's okay. You can always, one thing I want to say to the listeners out there is wherever you are in your grief journey or your support to someone in grief, or maybe just listening out there for a future potential for grief, which we all have, you want to allow the person that you love to be authentically themselves, even if it's shocking and you can't handle it. It's not your job to handle someone else. Yeah. It's not your job to change someone else. Loving someone doesn't mean you get to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
Loving someone means you have the capacity to sit in all versions of themselves, even if you decide that friendship evolves to a place where you're no longer in alignment. That's okay. And that's what we've seen, I think, with our friendships.
Yeah. There's a weird part of me that still misses it, though.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's a loss, so you're never going to stop grieving it,
Yeah.
The belonging is what is really how we got into this in the first place.
Yeah.
Our need to belong is greater than our need to know what we need.
Yeah.
Our need to belong and be loved and connected that's Maslow's hierarchy of need. That is a fundamental need.
Yeah.
My question to the listeners out there is, what if we can belong and need to be needed by people who let us be our actual self?
Yeah, I think that's probably a major part of the puzzle.
When you have death and secondary losses, it's forced upon you.
Yeah. And
so, loving yourself, how do you love yourself now?
I let myself feel the way I feel.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I think about what I want and who I am.
Yeah. I love myself enough to recognize that love is not me giving myself away, changing who I am to be what others need me to be. Loving myself is allowing myself to trust that I am enough exactly as I am in this moment, which might be a little bit different than the next moment with the evolution of and all the work we're doing. But
and as good as being loved by others feels, there's nothing that quite feels as good as when you really love yourself. It's
choosing yourself. Yeah.
It's hard to describe how powerful and how it's transformational.
It is, and I'm not. If you're not ready to say I love myself, I'm still struggling with that terminology.
Oh, unfortunately, it's not a switch.
No,
if it was a switch, it'd be fucking awesome. You just say, I love myself. This is what I did.
Right.
But this is a daily, minute to minute, month to month thing.
You have to choose yourself. I think start by asking yourself, who am I? Doing your mirror work. Secondary, I think, work on, and this is what I work with my clients in early stages, trusting yourself enough to know that you can take care of yourself. You don't need another person to fill the holes inside of you to tell you your worth. You have to do that for yourself. You have to believe inside yourself with no one else that you are okay. You are enough.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And it almost has to break probably the mold that you've been taught up until this point, especially as a child.
Yeah, because no childhoods are perfect, right? There's trauma and that there's abuse and all that stuff makes it much more difficult to be your authentic self and to know what you want.
This is why there's layers. You have to peel back the layers. Grief in all of its wretchedness and all of the pain and ugliness that we discussed, it's a natural shattering.
Yeah.
And those false identities take a lot of energy. We've talked about this in the show. That's when I talk about the friction or the gap between the truth of who you are and the world's view of who you are.
Yep.
Most of us live to present the world's view of who we think we need to be in order to be loved. We don't want to be alone, right?
Right.
That's scary. So we change ourselves to be who the world needs us to be. Well, when death is upon your doorstep, you are alone. And your worst nightmare has come. The person maybe, and you think in your head, the only person in the world that maybe loved me is gone.
Yeah.
And that's not true. The person that really loves you is inside of you.
Yeah.
And when you learn to go inside because you're forced to or because you're choosing to, even if you haven't gone through a loss, we love to think about people who don't have to go through all this suffering. They just start to love themselves. Resiliency is born. And that is what this company is about. And it's taken me months to put it into words.
Yeah. This is good.
Yeah. So, like, subscribe.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that last time.
And I think if you want resources to immerse into wake culture or to work on yourself, there's no time like the present to sign up for our rebirth retreat, which is coming November 2024. It's in the most beautiful indigenous land in Mexico, Comexto, Mexico.
It's pretty.
It's absolutely stunning. And I am going to be using the most amazing healing practitioners that will blow your little minds away. I will be having a Bambino, so this is going to be led by actually a person that I go to personally for my self-work and who I just fall into her arms. And she is
remarkable.
Millions of times ahead of me in healing and her knowledge base. So quite a treat. It's actually going to be something that really, if she put her own, the cost of her would be very high, as she's worth every dollar. And it's coming affordably to you through this retreat. So sign up, and it's a great time to immerse and really fold into the self.
Yep.
So.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you guys all learn to work on the self.
This has been Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long. Be sure to check out other episodes where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.